Welcome, everyone, to the Tuesday, November 30th edition of the Rotowire NFL podcast, brought to you by WynnBET. I'm Joe Bartel. You can follow me at JB Fantasy Sports. Alongside me, as always, Jake Letarski. You can follow me at Roto. Jake, before we get started, let's get a word from our sponsors, those title sponsor guys, WynnBET. If there's one thing we appreciate here at Rotowire, it's making good decisions, even more so making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with Rotowire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for Rotowire's fantasy podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, Rod Robbins, live betting, and so much more right at your fingertips. If you want a break from sports betting, head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on the roulette, double down blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all Rotowire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. It's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for Rotowire's fantasy podcast. Jake, we actually have a pretty busy waiver wire podcast this week. We got the Delvin Cook injury, Christian McCaffrey injury. A couple of wide receivers, I think, have a little bit emerged as targets this week. And obviously, Taysom Hill, likely your starter for the Saints, too. We'll get to all that and more. But first, we have to discuss the demise of Pete Carroll and Russ Wilson, because the Seahawks put on another clunker of a performance, and this time on the bright lights of Monday Night Football.
Yeah, you would have thought at this point in the year, if their defense played even remotely well, which they have been doing over the past few weeks, they'd be able to win some games here. But Russ just isn't Russ, and I don't know if he came back too early or, I mean, it was a broken finger. So I think Louis Riddick, you can say what you want about the Monday night broadcast. I missed the Manning cast, but he made a good point on the broadcast where he's almost afraid to follow through on his throws, because that means extending down and like putting his finger again in harm's way. And that's why you see all these overthrows that I never remember seeing from Russell Wilson. And I've watched him, since he was a Badger. So I don't know if it's physical or mental at this point, but he's got all the weapons in the world, maybe not running backs. I can go on a whole nother rant about Alex Collins and how, man, I would have been in such great position if I could have just got like 9 fantasy points out of Alex Collins. I thought it was going to be great for a touchdown upside, but he basically disappeared after that fumble in the second quarter. The Seahawks had just made a big play to Tyler Lockett, and then Russ hit Alex Collins for an actual dump off pass. Normally that's the DJ Dallas job, but Collins got the ball and ran for 13 yards. Immediately got the ball popped out. So I don't know if they're going to give him another chance. We'll see what happens when that backfield gets healthy, but he might be on the drop list here pretty soon for me. I'm probably just going to rage drop him after this week anyway, because he didn't perform for me. But again, the Seahawks were bad, but Washington, Taylor Heineke, they played pretty good. They moved the ball. They ran the ball especially well. Logan Thomas is back. He looks like he's good. If he was on a pitch count this week, I think he can kind of free him in future weeks. We just got to watch those backfield injuries, of which there were multiple ones. Mckissick goes down after scoring twice in the game. Mckissick goes down at the end with like a head neck injury. He gets carted off. We'll have to watch that. Gibson, huge workload for Gibson. He came up limp a couple times, but was always getting back in the game. And, he's managing every injury in the book, kind of like Stafford. So, we'll have to see where that goes, as far as Washington running backs. But, that pretty much sums up my take on that game in one big long rant.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Alex Collins, because I think that's going to be an interesting one. And we've been identifying, obviously, the top options game. We'll talk about Chipa Hubbard and Alexander Madison and probably Jamal Williams, too, with DeAndre Swift. Those are obvious names. But if you are in a 12 or 14 team league, they might not be available. I think kind of how I was pre-speculating on Deonta Foreman, and that kind of proved to be true with the Titans. DJ Dallas is a name that I am a little bit interested in in the same vein. I mean, like, Alex Collins has not been very effective, I've thought. And honestly, if you're going to turn things around for Seattle, it's going to be more of the rushing game, because you talk about Russell Wilson's limitations. And while, yes, he threw for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns, he missed a couple of pretty obvious throws, and Washington's defense is the worst against quarterbacks. We knew that coming into it. So these numbers feel a little bit inflated for Russ Wilson. I think DJ Dallas, by the end of the year, takes over that starting job. How effective and what does that mean for that offense? I don't know. It's low-end running back too, right?
I guess I don't know the exact statuses of Travis Homer and Rashad Penny off the top of my head, but,
Penny's on IR.
Yeah, he's on IR. Okay, fair enough. So, but I just don't think that any one back is going to be the guy over there. It'll be split between, early down and late down. And none of them are playable, barely even rosterable if this offense can't move the football. They're, the only things that Russ is successful on are throwing to Gerald Everett and maybe a couple dump offs. But otherwise, like, everyone says, I was surprised I went through that whole rant without mentioning how DK Metcalf had 0 targets in the first half, because that was all of Twitter, everyone freaking out, the broadcast freaking out. I think I heard that phrase 15 times. But their offense was was the dump offs to Everett and the running backs. And then Russ would just chuck it up in the air to Lockett, and Lockett came down with a couple plays. Maybe he's hoping for a pass interference, but there's no touch or there's no leading. He's just chucking it up in the air at his general facility, like, if and only when he's got, clearance for his arm to come down. So there's something funky going on there. I almost think, with Seattle, it would be wise to let Russ get right and get confident. Maybe play Geno for a game or two. Actually, what do they have to lose now? They're not making the playoffs. So, maybe throw him out there as an audition or whatever you want to do. But it almost reminds me of the Browns and Baker Mayfield and Case Keenum. Baker's not right. Baker's hurt. But they still throw him out there to play subpar football when Case Keenum's probably one of the more, acceptable backups in the league. So why do you not, sit Baker, let him get right and play Keenum? It's the same thing with Russ and Geno. It's the same dynamic for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, the Seahawks don't have their first round pick because that was part of that Jamal Adams trade. I think the New York teams have picks 4 through 9 as of right now between the Giants.
I was going to say the Jets have 4 and 5, right? That was the thing, because
they have 4 and 5.
The pick they got from Seattle is even better than their own pick somehow.
Yeah, and the Giants have the Bears pick and their own, and
yes.
So that's a good deal for the Jets, and I think that's why by default you're going to see Russ Wilson out there, because I think he's still a better guy than Geno Smith, but at this point he probably isn't even startable in 12-team formats. I like, you're rostering him, but you're not starting him.
Russ has led 1 touchdown drive since he came back, and that's 3 games. I think it's something like that. 1 touchdown drive, that one towards the end of the first half, or in the first half last night.
Well, what about the end of the game drive? That's 2, right?
Oh, yeah, I guess. Okay, yeah, that's 2.
You don't count that 32-yard bomb to Freddie Swain?
Yeah,
he almost brought him back to OT.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, fair enough. I was I still had the game on in the background, but I was tuned out, admittedly, doing a little Cyber Monday shopping here that I missed out on. So
I was already asleep. I honestly woke up and was like, oh wait, that game was close. I didn't even realize that. So I went back and watched some of the highlights. Oh, okay.
I guess it's different with you with a kid, but I'm not physically capable of falling asleep before like midnight, 1 a.m. That's just.
I was probably out by 9 o'clock. I did Roto Hoops, and we got done at 8:30. I was got back at 9 o'clock. I was done 5 minutes later. Hence why my voice is dying the way it is. But okay, enough Seattle, Washington talk. I think there's going to be maybe some pickups. And I mentioned DJ Dallas as a possibility as a low-end sleeper. We have to see what happens with J.D. McKissick, who scored those 2 touchdowns, but will he come back healthy? You were talking about McKissick as a pickup a couple weeks ago with Antonio Gibson being hurt. Well, now what did the Washington franchise do at running back? We'll find out more information. Probably can't find out this podcast.
Yeah, so, he was 55% last week when I was like, hey, maybe take a look, because I like him rest of the season. Then he comes out, has real good game for anyone who took my advice. But again, now we don't know. He was carted off with head and neck injuries. So
we don't really know. It was kind of like an ambiguous.
It doesn't say. I looked it up beforehand. Not a whole lot going on. It looked like he crunched his head and neck a little differently, where in a case where like a concussion would probably be a best case scenario, and you don't often say that. So again, that's me. Fell a few classes short of my MD. That's my eyeball analysis right there.
Yeah, you can mark that off the drinking bingo list. Jake discussing his few creds short of the MD on the podcast. Let's move over to the quarterback position. Obviously, 4 teams on bye this week. Actually, some pretty critical ones. Packers, Browns, Panthers, Titans. The Panthers one's going to be key for the running back section, because maybe you might not be as interested in Chipa Hubbard in shallower formats. But from a quarterback perspective, it's the Taysom Hill show. The Saints have announced that Taysom Hill is going to be taking over as the starter, or at least I should say he's getting starting reps at the quarterback position. He curiously was not playing against the Bills this Thursday in that blowout loss to the Bills. And they were saying, hey, he's still got a foot injury going on right now. He was active, but one of those, let's be safe about it and not actually play him. So I'm a little bit skeptical about what Taysom Hill can do if he is not healthy. But if the Saints are putting him out there as the starting quarterback, you would assume he is healthy, and they have playoff aspirations yet to come. I don't know. It's a tough matchup this week against the Cowboys on Thursday night, who are riddled with COVID at the moment. But I think Taysom Hill moving forward is a really interesting pickup in deeper leagues.
Yeah, now when you look at fantasy points against stats, I mean, it doesn't really apply to a guy like Taysom Hill. So if I say, the Cowboys are giving up, the 24th fewest, so I mean, 24th they rank 24th in fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks. That doesn't mean a lot because a guy like Taysom Hill gets quite a bit of his production from his rushing, and I think, of course, that's what makes him the best pickup in the quarterbacks is over any of these streamers, at least because of, just simply because what he can do with his legs. I mean, last year he scored 8 touchdowns on the ground. So he's 8 rushing touchdowns. So he's very capable in that sense. I don't necessarily know if the results are going to be better, but the other benefit Taysom Hill gets is Mark Ingram's practice on back-to-back days. I think he shed his injury tag, and Kamara even was a limited participant today, I believe. In the estimated practice report. So, arguably the two best weapons on that entire team, he'll be getting back, and then he can rush, and it's a good, combination of circumstances here for them. And after Dallas this week, they get a long week, and then they get the Jets, a good matchup, then Tampa Bay, and then Miami. I mean, the Jets are only middle of the pack against opposing quarterbacks because of the blowout factor, I believe. I don't actually believe the secondary is crazy good. And then you get 26 and 27 in Tampa Bay and Miami, week 15 and 16. So I think if you're in a 2-quarterback league, he's been rostered already. I think if you're in a single quarterback league, I don't know. I'd rank him rest of season. I know it's a lazy comp because they're both rushers, but like him and Cam Newton, who do you take rest of season? Because
Cam Newton's not starting. I think. Well, he will, but he was. I mean, you talk about rage dropping Alex Collins. I rage dropped Cam Newton earlier in my league. He had to start 1 week with Patrick Mahomes on bye. 1 week, and Cam Newton got 9 points. Come on, Cam. Come on. That was ridiculous.
They featured that. That was one of the at least more competitive of the early morning games. So I caught a lot of that on Red Zone, and you can tell why New England let him go. He's not so great throwing the ball. Maybe it's just a bad day, but the accuracy isn't quite there. So the only thing about that debate is, Cam probably starts the rest of the season, right? Can Taysom Hill get re-injured? Does he play poorly and they go back to Simeon? I mean, what do they have to lose at this point? But I feel like Newton has maybe a tad more security, but other than that, that's really the only thing. And better wide receiving weapons. I'll give him that too. But those are the things going in his favor. Otherwise, you're right. It's probably Taysom.
Another streamer that I think is at least a little bit interesting, Justin Fields, possibly back against the Cardinals this week. Everyone discussing Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins' status, but we have Justin Fields, quarterback for the Bears, who could be available, but he hasn't. I mean, he hasn't resumed practicing yet. Give us the lowdown on the Bears quarterback situation.
Yeah, so Fields hasn't actually started throwing yet. Well, okay, this is as of a few days ago. We need a new update on him, but sometimes the news just isn't there. I think today, when today's practice report comes out, we'll get a much better deal. But as of November 26th, Fields hasn't actually thrown since suffering those cracked ribs, and that was week 11 in against Baltimore. And then of course Dalton came into the game, and then Dalton started on Thanksgiving. It's been a long break. Arizona, oddly effective. They've been pretty effective against fantasy quarterbacks here. So this isn't necessarily a home run matchup, but you're basing this, the Field situation on what you've seen. He's been able to put together a few more drives lately, and of course he brings you those rushing yards. Actually, oddly enough, not so much on the rushing. Yeah, I guess he had the 100-yard rushing game. So, you can give him that for sure against the 49ers of all teams. But so you'll want to watch that for your 2-quarterback leagues. Fields is a somewhat interesting streamer. And then the rest of the season matchups aren't anything great. He makes this list mostly for 2-quarterback leagues because otherwise it would be the Andy Dalton show once again.
Right. Yeah. I think it's going to be an interesting one to monitor. If Justin Fields does play, the Cardinals are one of the few teams that I think can handle his athleticism. They have so many fast linebackers, and they have very little to worry about at wide receiver with Darnell Mooney doing well, but Allen Robinson very, very inconsistent. Cole Kmet's non-factor for me. I think it'd be a heavy David Montgomery game, and probably still would be regardless if Dalton is playing or not. So
I'm just going to give him 30 touches until he injures himself. That's the plan with Montgomery, and then we'll start the cycle again.
Yeah, Bears fans can't be happy enough that they won on Thanksgiving because now Matt Nagy theoretically has a job for another week. Yippee for them.
Yeah, whatever happened to that report, he was getting fired after Thanksgiving regardless.
Yeah, he had to win. That was all it took. Just get that win over the winless Lions, and you evidently can have a job for future seasons. That's fantastic. Let's move over to the Broncos. Teddy Bridgewater left Sunday's game. I was watching that one pretty closely as a Chargers beat reporter. Then returned later on with a shin injury. Drew Lock looked okay, had the interception, wasn't fantastic. The Broncos play the Chiefs this week. We know the Chiefs defense is not very good, especially against the run. So expect a lot of Javonte Williams, a lot of Melvin Gordon. But I mean, this is a situation that could affect Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick. We know Tim Patrick's had some value with Teddy Bridgewater under center. What's his stats, and you think if he's able to play this week?
Yeah, I mean, I would guess that I think Teddy, the situation with him is that he's said to be feeling much better. So it's most likely Teddy over Drew Lock. But, again, just a bullet point to make because the matchup's pretty decent, and that will be relevant for 2 quarterback league and super flex players. The other one in a similar vein, Jalen Hurts, who, you mentioned your Cam Newton frustration. I had my Jalen Hurts frustration, had a great game, but just couldn't stop giving the ball, didn't have
a horrible game.
Horrible game. He couldn't stop he had a great game giving the ball away to the other team.
Yeah.
Happened. But Hurts is apparently managing ankle soreness, and Gardner Minshew is the backup here. Would love to see some Minshew mania against the Jets at least once this season. One time this season, maybe Gardner get in the game. But yeah, those are both situations that, again, we'll see the practice report this week and how things play out. I'm actually starting to get a little bit more interested in Tua. Now I know the Giants, Tua and the Dolphins, they have the Giants this week who shut down Hurts completely. But Tua in the last 2 games, 27 for 31 against a highly ranked Carolina defense. So that impressed me a whole lot. And 27 for 33 against the Jets the week before. Now they have the Giants. And then, of course, they have a week 14 bye here. So you're not doing it. But, if you need a streamer this week, after seeing what Tua was able to do against Carolina, after seeing the offense be able to move the ball like that, maybe they can do it against the Giants too. So if you need a streamer, he probably sneaks up there with Hill and Fields if he plays here. I would say, he would be in the top 3. The top 3 is very interchangeable. I couldn't lean on anything to rank him like that, but I still think that the top 3 in terms of pickups are going to be Tua, Taysom Hill, and Fields maybe if he plays. And the only other name I wanted to mention, Mac Jones has been playing pretty well too for New England. Now they have a tough game against Buffalo. However, Tre'Davious White is injured out for the season. So, I don't know. That probably has a trickle-down effect. Not everybody can be the Packers and lose the top cover cornerback in the game like Jair Alexander and still end up a top 10 defense in the league. Normally that trickles down to the defense having to play less man coverage in that situation here. And maybe Mac Jones can take advantage of that. Not such a great. He had a pretty good matchup against Tennessee and put up almost 25 fantasy points, which is decent. But Jones brings, I think, a reasonable floor. But again, he also has a week 14 bye here. So these are all short-term, very short-term options, if you're dealing with one of those 4 quarterbacks that's on a bye this week. And, out of all those teams, you probably weren't starting Baker,
Aaron Rodgers,
Tannehill at this point.
Yeah.
Newton, a streamer at best. So if you're an Aaron Rodgers manager, then this is, those are the guys to look at.
That's where I go with Tua or Mac Jones. If you are a Rodgers manager who's okay, you got to find somebody. I think I would go with Tua and then Mac Jones, but Mac Jones is totally fine. And I think more than likely one or both those guys will be available in that situation. Taysom Hill in a 2 QB league, I'm totally fine with as well. But it's more of a speculative ad down the road, and you need to have the Saints get a little bit more healthy. So let's move over to the running backs real quick here. So we mentioned Ty Johnson and J.D. McKissick and Dontrell Hilliard, who actually had a pretty good game last week as well, too. Rex Burkhead among pickups last week. Much bigger news from the running back position this week. Couple of guys to mention here, and I guess we probably need to start with Alexander Madison first, only because he's at 51% rostered already on Yahoo. You and I both know we played plenty of fantasy leagues before. That should have been more like 80, 90, 100% rostered, especially if you had Delvin Cook. That being said, check your lineups first. Check your leagues first. Just search Alexander Madison or just Madison. Make sure he is not available, because if he is, top pickup, rest of waiver budget spending. clearly the guy you want to go ahead and target, even in an eight
Mhm.
team league, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He's startable in an 8-team league because guess what? He's got Detroit this week, and Detroit loves giving up fantasy points to opposing running backs, just even more than they do just losing in general. So it's a perfect matchup here. Delvin Cook, I think he was all ready to playing with one separated shoulder, and then I think he separated the other one. I believe that's what the case is that happened here, and it looks like Cook is going to miss at least 2 games with the aim to return December 20th against Chicago. So that means you're getting a fantasy RB1, against Detroit, and then Pittsburgh fell significantly in the fantasy points versus opposing running back rankings this week because Joe Mixon ran all over them, and that was just so odd of the Steelers to let that happen. So you have two weeks of pretty solid matchups there, and we know 2 weeks, but I mean, we'll really have to see here. I could see it extending beyond that. I don't know if I'm going to take all these coaches' words at face value necessarily. So Madison has to be your top guy. You're picking him up. You're starting him. Against Detroit this week, I think you could argue he's an RB1. There's can I name 10 running backs I'd rather start before him?
Well, let's test this theory up because Dash Clean has an embarrassment of riches at running back. He says start 3 of these guys. Ezekiel Elliott, who theoretically is going to get more workload if you listen to Jerry Jones this week. Daryl Henderson, who has another juicy matchup as well, too, in the slate. Leonard Fournette, 4 touchdown Leonard Fournette, or Alexander Madison.
Ooh, yeah. So this is the exact 8-team league, I guess, that we got to put our money where his mouth is when we say to do that. Am I crazy to sit Zeke in this game? The Saints really shut people down between the tackles, and you see that report of him going to go out and get more work. After watching the Thanksgiving Day game and seeing him come up, apparently injured a couple of times with how effective Tony Pollard is too. This is a game where I feel like you're going to want to use more swing passes and pitches and stuff. Now, I could be completely insane, but I think if it were my team, Zeke might be the bench guy.
I think you're insane, and I'm also agreeing with you. I will bench Zeke only because Henderson, Fournette, and Madison, each one of these teams are probably, and I haven't looked at the spreads, but they're probably favored by double digits easy. And if that's the case, it's the running game that normally benefits from that. Mm-hmm. Vegas isn't wrong, right? Or not very wrong often. I'm going to go with Henderson, Fournette, and Madison. Zeke's the one that's hitting the bench, especially with how banged up he is, how Tony Pollard's looked pretty good. It's not even close to me. I think I have like a top 10 running back. The only issue is all 3 of these guys are top 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one thing you'll want to watch is the Darrell Henderson practice report. I just looked him up for the heck of it to see, to confirm that he's got the Jaguars this week, which is a pretty excellent matchup. But he did pick up a quad injury in Sunday's loss to the Packers. And, McVay says he'll be limited, but he doesn't expect it to be a long-term issue. So maybe we see a little bit more Sony Michel, especially if the game gets out of hand. So Henderson, if you think we're completely insane about the Zeke thing, and want to go against us, I guess Henderson would be next up to sit probably.
Let's turn our attention to some running backs that maybe could be available in other leagues. So I think we'll go first with Chipa Hubbard. And the only reason why I want to go that direction is because Hubbard, if he was playing this week, probably is the next best pickup. We don't know the stats. You have DeAndre Swift. We'll get to that, and Jamal Williams in a second. But I think with Christian McCaffrey on injured reserve, we know done for the year. We've seen Chipa Hubbard be the guy for the Panthers offense. What does that offense look like with Cam Newton now at quarterback? I don't know. That's a different question. Maybe you'll have answers to it. But this is the starting running back, and he's only rostered in 30% of Yahoo leagues at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing with Chuba Hubbard, as you said, is having Chuba Hubbard in Week 14 doesn't mean a damn thing if you're knocked out of the fantasy playoffs here. So that's the one thing that you're going to have to stomach and deal with. Now, when he does come back in Week 14, he gets the Falcons, who are 30th against opposing running backs. So you really love that, especially in PPR formats. And when Chuba, earlier on, I mean, he's got 4 games of double-digit fantasy points, in PPR formats, and a few more where he got real close. So he has a pretty low floor. He's clearly the guy over Amir Abdullah, maybe a couple touches for Abdullah at best here. And a great matchup Week 14, but then he's got Buffalo, Tampa Bay, New Orleans to end the fantasy championship. So the rest of season schedule is not that great. But nonetheless, if you had to use a top waiver wire pickup on him just to get a guy to start, as a guy who was relying on McCaffrey the last couple of weeks, unfortunately, I could see it because, getting 8 to 10 points out of your RB2 is fine. But again, you need to feel pretty good about your playoff spotting and situation if you're going to make that move.
I tend to agree. And, I'm looking at my leagues. That was the first name after Madison that I'm searching for and hoping that I can utilize in some instances. I saw more Chipa Hubbard available in my 15 leagues than I did Jamal Williams, which I thought was a little bit surprising because Jamal Williams, prior to this Thursday, was largely ineffective, had been more or less moved out of the rotation altogether. Well, DeAndre Swift, 2 drives in, damages his shoulder, out for the game, completely ruins my NFFC team and many other teams I was relying on, made my Thursday immediately bad on Thanksgiving, which was fantastic to see. But we have Jamal Williams now as one of the possible pickups as well at 39% roster on Yahoo. Where do you rank him among Chipa Hubbard, especially with the stats of DeAndre Swift still unknown?
Yeah, well, I don't know if we can say the status of DeAndre Swift is completely unknown. Dan Campbell said on Monday that, quote, it's hard to see Swift playing against the Vikings this week. So,
okay,
I'm going to go ahead and assume that he's going to be out. Now, I know this has burned us on the show before, but again, doing the Tuesday waiver wire show, we have to make some of these guesses. I'm going to guess he'd be out. And I mean, if Jamal Williams does dominate the snap share over there, I mean, he 63.3% on Thanksgiving. This Jermar Jefferson guy is back, and he actually outsnapped Godwin Igwebuike, if I'm saying that right. But I think Williams can actually dominate this backfield. Not the greatest of matchups against the Vikings here, but we'll see what happens. I mean, DeAndre Swift is clearly a big part of the future of the Lions. He's their best offensive player by a mile, and it's not even close here. So why are you throwing him out there in a lose-lose situation? We'll have to see here. But Minnesota coming up, middle of the pack. Denver, Arizona, Atlanta. I mean, 16 and 17 are Atlanta and Seattle, but I don't expect Jamal Williams to be like the sole guy at that point. But again, pretty short-term pickup, but he's not a bad option to back up your Madison or even your you might have to rank him ahead of Chuba just because he's playing this week.
That's what I was going to say. So how do you rank these guys?
If you're fighting, I mean, the ranking of these players is completely situational, where you're at in the standings, what you need to happen this week. If your playoff spot is, and you could also be affected if your league does first round buys, like, oh man, do I need to, because I mean, the Packers have a couple running backs people are using. Obviously, McCaffrey owners were going to be, in the toilet anyway. But there's some running backs on bye this week that you need to get that RB2 out of, and you're just trying to get 8 points. So your situation definitely depends on how much you value either securing a first round bye or if you need to win now to get into the playoffs, because Williams is up there, but I do have to think about Boston Scott a little bit, right? I mean, now granted, I believe they're not actually on a bye this week. So
Scott, but Jalen Hurts has been not great. I mean, they have the Jets, who are the league's worst defense against the run. The only issue is if you are the league's worst defense against the run, couldn't the second most mobile quarterback in the league also take advantage of that in Jalen Hurts? If he's healthy, then yes, but we don't know if he's healthy. That's what makes this a little bit confusing for the Eagles situation.
Yeah, so the only reason I mentioned Boston Scott is because Miles Sanders comes back this week, and he goes ahead and injures himself, missed most of the second half with what I think was an ankle injury. We'll have to see. I don't know if it's related to the same ankle that kept him on IR, but that's a little bit concerning. And Boston Scott finished as Philly's running back leader in both carries, snaps, and fantasy points. So he's the guy. Jordan Howard's still dealing with a knee injury. He didn't play. I don't know what's going to happen. They do have a week 14 bye, so at least you get them for week 15. So maybe I could see a scenario in which Sanders and Howard both sit through the bye. Scott's the guy, with Gainwell being, slightly involved, but sporadically involved. I'm going to retire from recommending Kenneth Gainwell as a pickup on this show this season. Just too many times he's passed the eye test and then been completely disappeared the next week. So I don't even want to talk about that too much, but Scott becomes very interesting because of the matchup, because of the injuries, and we'll see what happens here.
Okay. Any other running backs you want to mention here?
So I'm going to steal this one from Alan and Jeff, who do the sneaky waiver wire ads. If you're watching us on the YouTube channel, maybe you saw this already, but with the Vikings situation, let me see if I can. Kene Nwangwu?
Sounds good to me.
Nwangwu? Yeah. I can't even say the guy's name yet, right? And I'm going to recommend him for dynasty formats. But no, Alan, being I know you're in some of those deep dynasty leagues. I'm going to probably make a bid on him if he is not rostered in our 14-team dynasty league, because Madison will get most of the carries, I expect, but maybe just maybe the rookie gets involved. Now he's got a couple kick return touchdowns on the year, so he's shifty, he's good in the open field. He's a 4th round pick here. People tend to forget about that. We've touted a lot of other 4th round picks or worse in this draft as guys that could be possible pickups, and just ridiculous speed. We don't even have an outlook written for this guy, but no, he's got crazy speed, and could potentially spell him for a few carries and be interesting and maybe be a part of the future there. So I wanted to mention him. Of course, we have to go back to the Foreman-Hilliard thing. Titans are on bye, so if you had to cut Hilliard to set a starting lineup, I could live with it. But I don't know. I think Foreman is still probably closer to the guy. Both of them fumbled. It is what it is. You keep a guy, stash him on your bench. They rank pretty low on the list this week, and then with Zach Moss being a healthy scratch on Thanksgiving and Devin Singletary still being unable to, 1, ever find the end zone, and 2, be consistently productive, I still think he looks the best running the ball out of what they have, but he has too many 0 or negative plays to consistently feed him those touches. Breida is starting to get involved a little bit as a pass catcher. This is really only playable, flexible, maybe if Zach Moss were to be a healthy scratch again. That whole situation mystifies me as well. But, Buffalo is theoretically a good offense, a good team, and Breida might be able to contribute. Again, in PPR leagues, getting 6-8 points out of a running back desperation start with 4 teams on bye, I can live with that.
Can I give you, or can I set the stage for the most pathetic Culver's board bet that we've ever done on this podcast?
Yeah, let's do it. We've actually done a stunningly lack of bets. It just doesn't come to mind so much. But basically, whatever you offer me, I'm going to take here. So
okay, so I don't know. Like, I think Nwangu is fine enough from a special teams perspective. I will sooner bet that whoever the Vikings call from the practice squad is going to produce more points, non-special team wise, than Nwangu is.
I would like to see what name that would be, but yeah, whatever. I'll take it.
I mean, like they
had Amir points. So if he returns another kick, most leagues count that as a touchdown.
Yeah, and I'm saying you don't get to get that cheap out for the Culver's board.
I don't get to get that cheap out for the board.
No.
Okay, then it's a stupid bet, but I'll take it anyway.
Okay, I don't like Amir Abdullah was the guy in the 3rd down capacity earlier this season. I think that's when Nwangu was injured, so it's possible that he'll come back and be like a decent enough backup to Madison. I just think the Vikings have other aspirations for what that backup running back position is, and it's not the explosive speed guy that Nwangu seems to be. What's
going to happen is up by 4 scores, Minnesota is going to take Madison out, run a toss play to this guy, and he's going to house it for 80, and then the bet will be over.
It's possible all we do is just have a toss play, and that will beat this bet because we literally don't know who the Vikings are going to call up from the practice squad to be that backup running back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll have to see. That'll be interesting.
Okay. We'll turn our attention to the wide receiver position. But before we do that, let's get a word from our sponsors, Yahoo DFS. The NFL season's heating up, and Yahoo's going big on daily fantasy football this season. There'll be a ton of big prize contests throughout the year on Yahoo, including their multi-entry contest now being shark-free. To celebrate Yahoo going big on DFS, as well as Yahoo Daily Fantasy becoming shark-free, Yahoo is giving all users the opportunity to claim free $10 in site credit. Users can take advantage of this free $10 site credit offer to join any paid contest, including Yahoo's biggest contest, the weekly $1 million DFS NFL Baller Contest. Obviously, the weekly $1 million contest features $1 million in total prizes, including first place receiving $100,000 and tons of overlay in prizes. Play daily fantasy football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim the free $10 offer to get started. Okay, last week we had talked about wide receivers, Van Jefferson, Cedric Wilson, who ended up being pretty good. MVS, not so much, although he did have a big catch at the end there. Traquan Smith and Nick Westbrook-Akeen. Honestly, most of these wide receivers did pretty good if you really needed some flex play. Not so much this week. I think it's more of a running back heavy waiver wire podcast, but there is the Kendrick Bourne show, who has been a touchdown machine for Mac Jones and company. And we just mentioned the Bills earlier, missing Tre'Davious White for the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, normally you go into a matchup with Buffalo and you think, okay, this is New England's best, pass catching threat. Arguably, Myers tends to be the volume guy, but Bourne seems to find the end zone a little bit more. So normally you go into that week thinking, okay, this guy's going to get a lot of one-on-one with Tre'Davious White. not going to get any touches. Now we don't necessarily know what's going to happen. I'll defer to Mario on the Thursday show. He's the big cornerback alignment guy over here. But at only 23% rostered with the huge game, with Mac Jones developing, growing, and playing better right in front of our eyes, he seems to be the only new name really worth talking about in terms of the wide receivers. But I do want to backtrack because I think the best wide receiver pickups this week are actually guys that we talked about last week, and I don't want to touch on any single one of them. I don't want to touch on any single one of them too much over the top, but Van Jefferson has to be number one. We see his role growing. We know he's capable. He's got the pedigree. Both him. So looking at the snap distribution, Kupp was on the field against the Packers 100% of the snaps. And then after that, they run through wide receiver sets. We've talked about this for a long time. Odell and Van Jefferson both are looking at 98.4%, of the snaps here. But it was Van Jefferson who, of course, had the better fantasy game and almost as many targets. He wasn't quite as target efficient, only caught 3 of his 9. Some of that you got to write off on Stafford, whereas Odell, caught 5 of 10. Both of them scored, but for some reason, Odell's 95% owned and Jefferson's, 49% owned. If you change both their names to John Smith and looked at their stat lines this season, everybody would rather have Van Jefferson, I think. But I just think he's a little bit under rostered, and I'm really happy to have some shares there. Cedric Wilson, Amari Cooper, and CeeDee Lamb are going to be back, so Cedric Wilson can probably go back to the bench. And MVS is also interesting because Randall Cobb got injured. He kind of limped off, didn't play the rest of the game. That means probably a few more looks for MVS, him and Lazard. Devontae's always going to be the volume king, but then, maybe 1 or 2 looks extra a game for MVS and Lazard. And with MVS being the deep ball threat, the home run hitter, maybe he could be interesting too.
Real quick with the correction, I'm not certain Amari Cooper is playing. Again, the Cowboys have an early Thursday matchup. We know Mike McCarthy's going to be out with COVID. Amari Cooper was in the Cowboys building, but Mike said that Amari Cooper is still dealing with a cough, hasn't really got his conditioning back yet. Okay. And if he doesn't practice tomorrow, probably isn't playing.
Yeah, I just assume because, COVID 2 weeks, these guys are, 27-year-old professional athletes that they don't actually have, that strenuous of a recovery. But given whatever's going around there and the fact that, maybe I don't even want to say numbers here, but, every once in a while you get the unique case where someone's hit extra hard by it. And, what does McCarthy say? My gut would be if he doesn't practice tomorrow, as in Wednesday, I don't see him getting into the game. So,
which seems obvious. I would imagine.
Okay, so maybe Cedric Wilson's still around, but they'll still have Lamb and Gallup back, and Lamb will be back, Gallup will be around. I don't know if that means enough Cedric Wilson targets here to really boot, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. A couple of these streamer guys that we had highlighted last week are on bye. Like Westbrook-Ikhine would have been somebody I would be picking up and playing probably this week too, but the Titans are in bye week. Cedric Wilson may be losing some of the value if with Lamb coming back and if Cooper comes back too, a little bit more difficult, and obviously MVS too. So
Westbrook-Ikhine, I could hear you making a case for cutting him. I know he had a good game and he's the volume guy, but I imagine they might get some of their IR guys up.
He's not even the volume guy. I think he's the touchdown guy, and that's where the value is. Julio Jones will not be back off of injured reserve yet. I think they have maybe 2 more weeks the most. So that's still value with him, and A.J. Brown also out. I think A.J. Brown is on injured reserve too. So it's one of those things where he's by default the best guy. I would not be dropping him in a 12 or 14 team league, especially with the Titans being, I think, a team that still is going to have to be pass heavy. I know Deonta Foreman and Hilliard did fine enough running the ball and kind of helped do Derrick Henry-esque things for that offense, but they're still not good enough players to really be able to do that week in and week out. And by default, they're going to have to be more pass heavy. The Titans will be, even on a bye, is what I'm saying. In a deeper league, do not cut Westbrook-Ikhine.
Fair enough. All right, do you want to do some quick hitters here to run through the rest of these guys? Nobody I'm crazy excited about, but we can rattle these next on my list off.
Yeah, go ahead. All
right, let's hit it. You can maybe do a preemptive strike on Devontae Parker. He's only 30% rostered in Yahoo formats. He had 7 or more targets in each of the excuse me. He had 7 or more targets in each of the 5 games he's actually played this season, so he is involved. The other guy that caught my eye a little bit was Leviska Chanal. He had 9 targets, only caught 5 for 33, so it wasn't a great fantasy day, but it was his most targets since week 6, and that interests me a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but Russell Gage is only 17% rostered. He seems playable. He's got 7 or more targets in 3 of his last 4 weeks, and he's more target efficient than someone who just, they go downfield with. They're finding ways to get him the ball, and it'll be helpful for PPR. So again, a couple desperation flex plays if you're looking for it.
I'm out on Devontae Parker. I'm tired of dealing with that mess. He's one of the reasons why my stake league team is third last right now, because I've been juggling bunch of baloney injured reserve guys like Julio Jones for much of the season. No way I want any share of Devontae Parker. And I think Jalen Waddle, we talk about Tua as a top quarterback pickup this week for good reason. I think Jalen Waddle and him have some insane chemistry. And I'd almost sooner rather have Will Fuller, who's also, I think, close to coming off injured reserve, as opposed to Devontae Parker.
I mean, I definitely have Parker over Fuller, but, all this says is, he remains on IR. He's not going to rejoin, or for Parker, he's not going to rejoin the team for practice Wednesday. So I think actually maybe, I put him down as a preemptive strike, if you're in a really deep league, but you can probably make it through this week if he doesn't play, and then they have a week 14 bye. But let's say if week 15, they end up with Parker and maybe even Fuller back, and Tua's playing anywhere near the way he's played in these last 2 games, man, they've got some nice fantasy matchups in the playoffs there, and Tua could be a stream that'll cause a lot of headaches decision wise.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And people are talking about possible playoff aspiration for the Dolphins. The AFC is just too crowded in that upper to high end, like 500 range for records. I want to say leagues records, where they're not going to make that kind of run, but they can be successful. And I think this could be a really big time period for Tua and his development and his tenure with the Dolphins, this 4 or 5 week stretch to the end of the season here. So I guess real quick with the tight ends, there's not a lot. And our favorite guy, Dan Arnold, was placed on injured reserve just recently, which means that James O'Shaughnessy, who was like the tight end to begin week 1, then he got put on injured reserve, prompted the Jaguars to make that trade for Dan Arnold.
Yeah.
Now comes back into the fold. I don't know. I looked at the rest of the season schedule for Trevor Lawrence because I'm a huge Trevor Lawrence fan. I've been largely disappointed for him. Mm-hmm. I'm not excited at all, even in the leagues where I've had Dan Arnold, to go ahead and get O'Shaughnessy in anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I just made a bullet point here because he logged 58 snaps the past week. I think the one guy that might actually be worth picking up is Foster Moreau of the Raiders here. Now, it's when Waller went down with a knee injury on Thanksgiving, I was very, very worried. But it looks like pretty much a best case scenario. He only suffered a knee strain. We don't know if he's going to miss time. He was recently called week to week. The last time Darren Waller missed the game, Foster Moreau caught all 6 of his targets for 60 yards and a score. Now, granted, that was against Philly, and they're dead last in points to opposing tight ends here. So he got about the best matchup he could have. But I think Foster Moreau is probably the best pickup option should you find out Waller wouldn't play.
I agree with you on that one. It's it might be one of those that you can kind of sneak by Thursday or Friday as we get a little bit more information regarding the Raiders practice report. Oh, hey, Darren Waller's not practicing. He was a limited participant, didn't practice Friday. You can almost get like there's obviously going to be. I think that's where the Chipa Hubbard and Alexander Madison, Jamal Williams names all kind of take some of that stress away from making these sleeper guys that will be a little bit more obvious and aware of every podcast and article. You can get the Foster Moreaus a little bit later in the week. And I actually wanted to mention one name at wide receiver that I've been looking at quite a bit in my deeper leagues, Josh Reynolds. Did you even know, Jake, that Josh Reynolds, former Rams wide receiver, was on the Lions?
I always remembered him being like I don't know, like Goff, like looking for him in the red zone as a third.
So Josh Reynolds signed with the Titans. He signed with the Titans earlier this offseason, stunk so bad they cut him, kind of is bouncing around the practice squads, lands back with Jared Goff's Lions, and had a 5 for 70 and a touchdown game this Thursday against the Bears. I don't know, I was comatose by the food and also in my deep feelings with DeAndre Swift missing that game early on. So I didn't watch the Lions games probably as hard as I should have. But I think Josh Reynolds is an intriguing name. Now, I've been pushing the Tyrell Williams train, and then I was going ahead and pushing the small guy, the fast wide receiver I'm blanking on right now. He was a start for a while too. I know the Lions stink, but because they stink, by default, someone other than Hawkinson has to be fantasy relevant. I think Josh Reynolds in super deep leagues, I'm thinking 14-team leagues, is where I'm getting him from, it can be a start and get you 8 to 10 points in a PPR format.
Whew. Yeah, that's rough. I mean, I don't know if I'm ready to give up on every single Detroit pass catcher. So maybe there's a guy outside of Hawkinson that could be viable. I don't like it, but yeah, sure. I mean, he's as good as any of those other quick hitter bullet points that I mentioned on there. And I also want to quick throw in one more tight end into the ring. This is dependent on the Bears quarterback situation that we talked about earlier. I don't think I'd throw him out there if Justin Fields is the starter, but Dalton seems to really like going to Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet has, he's got the draft pedigree as a second-round pick, and he had 11 targets this past week with Dalton under center. Now, granted, it's about as friendly of a matchup as you're going to get. Well, Detroit's actually middle of the pack against tight ends. Arizona, oddly, is number 2 against tight ends, so it's not necessarily a matchup, but I think the volume will be there if Dalton ends up if Fields has to sit and Dalton ends up playing, which, the whole Nagy thing, do you think – I mean, I almost think Dalton, if he's worried about his job, Dalton gives him a better chance to win. And I want to see the organization, obviously with my rooting interest, I want to see the organization continue to screw up. So I would like to have Dalton lead the Bears on a run and maybe save Nagy's job, but we'll see what happens there.
That's fair. Before we get to the streamer defenses and probably a few user questions here on the site, let's go ahead and get a word from our sponsors. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football, and they're running huge guaranteed contests each week this NFL season. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top-tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Sign up today and get a free 6-month Rotowire subscription. Here's how you claim your Rotowire subscription. Visit rotowire.com/thrive. Then deposit a minimum of $10 and receive a 100% deposit bonus back up to $100. You play in your first paid contest, and boom, you receive that free 6-month Rotowire subscription. Again, visit rotowire.com/thrive through THRIVE. Deposit a minimum of $10 and receive 100% deposit bonus back up to $100. And then you play in your first paid contest. It's that simple. You get that free 6 months Rotowire subscription, and you're good to go. So that's Thrive Fantasy. Streaming defenses real quick. I mean, like there are some interesting options. We have the Eagles against the Jets. Hopefully Zach Wilson continues to start because he's been great for fantasy defenses out there right now. And sure seems like that could be the case against the Eagles with the Dolphins too.
Did you see the play where he took off well behind the line of scrimmage, then tried to shovel it in front of him to the running back when he was already, I had to take my brain a second to process that, but like, wait, he just put the ball on the ground. That's a fumble. Like, what the heck are you doing, Zach Wilson?
Yeah, it was an interception because it bounced off the running back's back, who was blocking for Zach Wilson, who clearly looked like he was going to run the ball. Bad choice. I know that we don't want to be like destroying these young quarterbacks. So I'm trying to be a little bit careful on that. I always think of Jared Goff, who I guess we do know now is bad, but with Jeff Fisher, he was not very good. And then with Sean McVay, he was pretty good. So I'm trying not to be like crazy about it, but he's been obviously the worst of these rookie quarterbacks. He's got the match against the Eagles. We got the Dolphins, who got 25 fantasy points, now facing the Giants. Daniel Jones, we know he's turnover prone at times. The Vikings against the Lions, and Lions could be missing and probably should be missing their best player, DeAndre Swift. And then the Chiefs, who with or without Teddy Bridgewater, possibly could do some things from a turnover perspective too.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I'm liking Minnesota more and more the more that I think about it. Now they're on the road, of course, but yeah, without DeAndre Swift, what does this offense actually have? That should be an easy win for the Vikings here, and probably I bet you that'll be. I didn't write over unders next to this one, but if Philly's not out there, I'd go Philly, Minnesota, Miami, and technically it'd be Minnesota, Miami, Kansas City because Philly's 58%, a little bit over our threshold.
Yeah, the over-under for the Vikings-Lions game is 47 points, whereas the Giants-Dolphins game is 41.5. So that makes me a little bit interested, but I assume it's just because Vegas believes the Lions are going to score almost nothing, and the Vikings will score a decent amount. And if the Lions do score, then you're kind of covered. Whereas with the Giants,
that 80-yard toss in the fourth quarter to win the board bet, they're banking on that.
That's right. Whereas the Giants and Dolphins game, like the Dolphins defense has been a little bit better as of late. We know both teams can be inconsistent and turnover prone, so that's where maybe it's a little bit lower. I think Vegas is sniffing out something that I'm not aware of, and I normally try to get on Vegas if that's the case. So I like the Dolphins defense enough. Yeah. Really, you could play the Eagles, Dolphins, or Vikings and I think completely have fantasy value in each one of them. They are easily top 12 plays this week, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if you blocked out all the team names and I just had to look at, game log, home team, over under, Miami would be the one that the blank card or whatever that I point at here, on the board here. So, the Dolphins have been a fantasy productive defense. They do have some playmakers there. They're opportunistic enough, and they're absolutely just fine. But I think you have to continue picking on the Lions and the Jets. And I guess we can't pick on the Texans this week. They have got an actual matchup where the defense is rostered in a bunch of formats.
Real quick, Harry Wolf, who's got the great Yao Ming picture on the StreamYard live show right now. He asked, he's got a PPR trade. So he's going to trade Travis Kelce, Jamar Chase, and then DK Metcalf for George Kittle, Claypool, Tyreek, and DJ Moore. Moore being on bye this week.
I think I would take advantage of the opportunity to unload Seattle offensive players and take the back half of that. Again, it depends. It depends what the rest of your roster looks like, how much you need to have a wide receiver 3, what position you're at it with respect to the playoffs. But just on the surface, I would take the Kittle, Claypool, Reek, DJ side.
Well, your normal rule of thumb is you're getting the best player. I think the best player in this deal is Travis Kelce. Am I not correct?
Kelce or Tyreek? I mean, Tyreek you could make a case for.
You absolutely could. I think both have been inconsistent at times, but when we talk about tight end, I think Travis Kelce gives you more value. And Jamar Chase at times has been the best wide receiver too. I would think I'd rather keep Kelce, Jamar, and DK because there's Claypool who's going to give you nothing or a little bit most weeks because Roethlisberger is just awful. And then there's DJ Moore, who basically is the same thing with Cam Newton right now. And you have that bye week. Kittle had like one catch last week. He had one catch. I don't know. That's a lot of nothing. And then Tyreek Hill. I mean, it's a lot of question mark.
Remember, one thing that we didn't actually talk about was, Deebo Samuel's going to be out 1 to 2 weeks, right? So there's going to be a bunch of targets to go around. I would be shocked if Kittle had less than 5 catches this week, number one. And I guess, I had always meant to put it in the outline, but I'm glad that this question sparked that. I guess Ayuk's back up to 89% rostered here, so there's nothing you can do there. But if you've stomached through that pain the entire season, I think it's finally going to pay off here.
You finally got some value, I guess. And then real quick, we had Dash Klein also ask 2 receivers to start, Jalen Waddle, Chris Godwin, or Deontay Johnson. To me, this is a pretty obvious Waddle and Deontay Johnson. Godwin with the Buccaneers in their matchup this week feels much more, maybe Tom Brady throws to Gronk, gets the tight ends involved for touchdowns, and it'll be another big learner for net game. I think Waddle and Deontay Johnson, especially in PPR, are my 2 top plays.
Yeah, exactly. Godwin's going to get limited by game flow. Even without AB last week, Godwin still only had 5 targets. So, this could obviously burn us. So, all 3 of these receivers are capable of breaking out for really, really big games. But I think you're right. Godwin's the one that sits this week.
All right. That does it for us on the Tuesday edition of the Rotowire NFL podcast, sponsored by WinBet. We'll be back again next week, hopefully to discuss some less impactful running back injuries. But stick around to the rest of the programs throughout the week, whether you get Wednesday with Jeff and his roulette guests or John and Mario on Thursday, getting you set for all the Week 13 crazy to say action. Of course, Fridays with the DFS guys over there too. This is Joe Bartel and Jake Letarski signing off.